Hi, welcome to episode 18 of the American Tributaries podcast, where to break out of the bubbles we've all been living in these last few years, we are using modern technology to explore the various currents of people in our great country, kind of like a 21st century Lewis and Clark journey. I'm your host, Michael Whidden, and thank you for joining me in this exploration of America. If you enjoy listening, please subscribe on whatever platform you're using, give us a like on this particular episode, and check us out on Instagram at American Tributaries. Today, I'm so very grateful to be joined by Darla Burton. Darla and I probably met under the most unexpected circumstances so far of any of the guests that I've had join me on the podcast. Back in April, my family and I went down to Greenville, South Carolina for a short vacation. And while we were there, we decided to visit the iconic Cracker Barrel, which none of us had ever been to before. And while we were there, the person who took care of us was so gracious and helpful and friendly that I thought it would be really interesting and a lot of fun to invite her to come onto the podcast. And Darla kind of accepted that invitation, which I really appreciated because I'm sure it was a bit out of the blue. But Darla, thanks so much for joining me today. How are you doing?
I am doing well. Thank you so much for inviting me and the gracious introduction. Thank you for inviting me. It really was odd circumstances, but it's been really great to get to know you and your family a little bit. And I'm excited about the opportunity to chat with you today.
Yeah, same here. Thank you. And I gotta say, like, even like going like the basic thing of like going to like Cracker Barrel was like different because, even in that respect, like being in New York, there might be one Cracker Barrel anywhere, but the only time you hear about Cracker Barrel is usually like when there's some like bad incident. That's when it pops up in the news. And because, I guess being somebody who's always lived either in like the Northeast, I don't necessarily have a lot of roots in the South, where I think Cracker Barrel is a lot more like present. So it was kind of a whole new experience. Like when we went there, we're like, I know that for a lot of people, this is like a fundamental part of their just existence since they've grown up. But for us, this is like brand new, and we had such a great time. So how long have you been working there?
So I have been there since 2009, so quite a while. Started as a part-time job, and I've just kept it through the years. For many years, I was down to one shift a week. I worked my one little closing shift every week. And then in January, I decided to go full-time. And so I've been back there full-time just this year. But I've been there since 2009. I enjoy it. And like you said, Cracker Barrel is, especially down in this area, it's a family favorite. We have lots of regulars that come in weekly, if not daily. And then it's also a place that families that are traveling, they will plan their trips around, their stops around the Cracker Barrels along the way. So people enjoy to hit Cracker Barrel while they're traveling.
And that was, and I think that I was looking a little bit about Cracker Barrel, and that was like its origins were really about, I don't know if it was necessarily a rest stop, but it was based on that idea of like being a place for people to go while they're on the road. Is that right?
That is correct. Yes. And even now, as you go into Cracker Barrels, you've got the store area, so you can do more than just sit down and eat. You can walk around, browse, get a few souvenirs. But they'll have maps, which is so fun because road maps are just non-existent now. But they'll have maps of the United States that show the different Cracker Barrels that you can stop at. And yes, they are planned to be close to exits of major highways. So you can quick get off, have your bite, walk around, and get right back on the road again.
It's a lot nicer than a mere rest stop on the New Jersey Turnpike, I can definitely say.
Yes. The other thing that people appreciate is that no matter where you go to Cracker Barrel throughout the country, the menu is pretty much going to be the same. The food quality is going to be the same. So you kind of know what you're going for, what you're going to expect when you get there.
Mm-hmm. And did you, and is it something like that do you remember the first time you went to Cracker Barrel as like a little girl, or is it just like it's always been there, so like you wouldn't even remember the first time because it was just a normal part of your life?
So I did not grow up down here in the South.
Okay.
And I do not recall if I had visited a Cracker Barrel before moving down here. But I will say that before I started working there, I would definitely go for the pecan pancakes. They were my favorite. And then as far as the gift store, that was always where I went to get like teacher gifts and grandparent gifts, little, little knick-knack type things for Christmas or birthdays. And so definitely those two items or parts of the Cracker Barrel experience um, had me from the get-go. So I don't remember my first visit, but I do remember what kept me coming back.
Mm-hmm. And where did you grow up then?
So I grew up in northern Minnesota, and I was
Okay.
in a very small town. One of those towns that they say has one stoplight. And so I grew up in Minnesota and moved down here when I came to college. And so I've stayed ever since. I've still got family back in Minnesota, although my parents have moved down here. So I've got my parents close by now.
Okay. Did they move down there because of you, or were there other attractions to South Carolina?
So when they moved down, my brother and I were both in college, and my dad had
Mm-hmm.
just retired. And so the idea was we'll move down, the kids can, stay with us, we'll save on room and board, we'll move back after they're done with college or go back home for the summers. My dad is an
Mm-hmm.
avid gardener, and he very
Mm-hmm.
quickly learned that up north, there's about 3 months that you can garden. And down here, there's about 3 months that you cannot garden. And he was hooked. So they have never gone back. They've been down here ever since.
And where did you and your brother go to school?
We went to Bob Jones University, which is a big
Okay.
Christian university here in Greenville, South
Mhm.
Carolina.
And how did you get attracted to a school in South Carolina from Minnesota?
Very good question. So I was homeschooled for the majority of
Uh-huh.
my schooling. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think third grade on through high school. And
Mm-hmm.
so when you homeschool, you work with different curriculums. And we had a couple of different um, Christian-based curriculums that my parents had used. And some of the materials we got were from the Bob Jones University Press. They put out curriculum for elementary grades. And then they also
Mm-hmm.
did, just like teachers go to teacher conferences, they held homeschool conferences during the summers. And so 2 or 3 summers while I was growing up, we would come down as a family and spend a week on the campus, and our parents would attend different conferences throughout the day, and we would do all the fun camp activities that you would traditionally think of. Um, and so we already had we were familiar with the campus. And then my
Mm-hmm.
brother came and I just followed. So
Mm-hmm.
we both graduated from Bob Jones University.
Okay. And what was it like for you adjusting from like the northern part of Minnesota to the warm, sultry south? At least that's what I would expect.
Yes. So the interesting thing about everybody thinks weather, but up north, it's a dry cold. And so I remember, growing up, being in high school, we'd be out with friends and mom would say, I'll pick you up at this time. And I remember standing outside in like below zero weather in just a turtleneck and a sweatshirt and maybe even socks and sandals. I mean, those high school things we do, and not thinking anything of it. But down here, it's a very humid cold. And so even when it's 30 degrees above zero, it is so bone chilling cold that you just feel it all the way through. And it's like, it doesn't matter how many layers you put on, it still feels cold. So that was definitely one interesting adjustment but then I guess the heat I've never really thought much of. I guess It definitely is different up north. You just kind of, the temperature changes throughout the day. So as a kid, it's like shorts and a tank top and a sweatshirt. Because when you first go out to play, it's going to be cold and you want that sweatshirt. But it's not going to be long and you're peeling it off and, come back to the evening, you want that sweatshirt again. We're down here, your shorts and a tank top, send the kids out first thing in the morning, you're waking up and it's
Mhm.
warm.
And when did you first? So you went down there for college, you graduate. Did you like what did you do? Did you know that you wanted to stay there as you were at Bob Jones? Did you decide that when you graduated? And like, what did you do when you first came out of school?
So I don't know that I really had I guess I definitely, when I came down here, did not plan on staying, but I didn't really have a plan on what I intended to do either. Um,
Who does?
I
I guess when
know.
you're in college.
So while I was in college, they have various ministries that the students participate in. And I got involved with a um, small church in kind of one of the, I say inner city, and it's nothing compared to inner city New York, but one of the low income neighborhoods. I got involved with a small church working with the children. We would do a Bible club every Friday night. And I just, I fell in love with the kids. But another thing that I noticed was, now growing up, I was very involved in my church and with the children of my church. So when I come down to college, and Greenville is right on the Bible Belt, big Christian university in Greenville. There are churches all over the place, big churches all over. And what I noticed was that the big churches that I would attend on Sunday morning, or work with like their kids groups on Wednesday nights, those kids had so much love and support in their community, their churches, their schools, everywhere they went. And it was almost like they just expected the people to be there, um, and it was so drastically different from the children in this low income neighborhood that they noticed when you weren't there, or they just lit up if you said, I didn't see you last week. Where were you? That you noticed that they were gone. And um, I had one particular little girl that we were talking about, one of the college students getting ready to graduate. And she said, um, I don't like graduate and I don't like getting married, because when people graduate or get married, they never come back. And it just
Oh,
touched my heart, like these kids, they just fall in love with these teachers that come every week, and then they see them for 4 years and then they're gone. Anyways, so since I was here in Greenville, my parents in Greenville, that church did a summer program also. And so I worked with the summer program through my summer between my junior and senior year. I worked with the summer program. And so by the time I was getting ready to finish up school, didn't have a definite career step to make. I kind of helped full time with the church and working with the kids in the community. And to this day, I still keep in touch with those kids, and their children now um, have become our godchildren, and they come and hang out for the day or hang out for the weekend or go on little day trips with us. Some of them have become our granddaughter's favorite people, So that's what's kind of kept me here. And then I met my husband through the church there, and we just grown our family. He's from this area. We live about 5 minutes from the home he grew up in. So he's got a
wow.
big family, lots of cousins in this area.
Mhm.
And so we're here.
So he probably would have the even the young memories of his first time at Cracker Barrel, having that like pecan pie or whatever it is that you were talking about.
He possibly could. I don't know if he has. I've never asked him about his first Cracker
Mm.
Barrel memories. He sure does love me to bring the food home, though. He loves that.
Well, so then I mean, I think that your two worlds where that was a convergence of different worlds. For my wife and myself, we like you two different worlds as well. It's funny how like a college is really the point where you bring together lots of people from different areas. Like my wife grew up in LA, but she was, born in Taiwan, and I was just a Long Island boy going to college, and it would never have charted a path that would have me meeting her, much less I guess coming together in 1993 and then being together ever since then. Um,
Yes,
it's amazing how your life takes unexpected turns.
I agree wholeheartedly. My husband and I have both said that we never would have imagined where life would have taken us, but we would not trade it for anything.
Yeah, yeah. And did you um is your husband in like the like so you had, I think, if I recall correctly, when you had said that you before you started working at Cracker Barrel or during, you also had been working an office job and you stopped doing that?
Yes. So when I got out of college, like I said, I worked with the church that I had been
Mm-hmm.
ministering through, and I worked with the children in the community, and then just worked some kind of odd jobs to pay the bills, supplement it. And then the church decided to open a school. And so I was taught school for 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then the position went to part time. And I couldn't figure out how to make that work part time and be there for my family as I needed and pay the bills. So I was already working at Cracker Barrel, and I was able to find the office job position. I worked for a third party administrator for insurance companies. Started that in 2009 also, but later in the year. And so, yes, I worked both jobs simultaneously all throughout those years. In the initial stages, I had to work more at my Cracker Barrel job because, America as it is, households are 2 and 2.5 incomes often, so full-time job and part-time job. Throughout the years, as I grew in my corporate job, my office job, I didn't necessarily need the supplemental income as much, but I just enjoyed the change of pace. I really did, from sitting behind a computer all day to serving people, seeing smiling faces, having those interactions. And so that's when I just kept my one shift a week just for that change of pace. And then, yes, I've been feeling for a couple of years that, I've got a lot of career ahead of me, and I don't see corporate America being where I'm to stay. Didn't know exactly where, still don't know exactly where, but my husband and I had discussed it, and he is an absolutely supportive person. That's the one thing I love about him the most, is how supportive he is. And so he was like, hey, we'll make it work, So in January, I quit there and just went full-time Cracker Barrel. So I'm serving full-time, absolutely love it. And just figuring out what my next step is. I know I want to work with children again, probably in the education field. Don't know if I want to be the teacher in a classroom, but I'll figure out where my niche is, I am sure.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you have a lot of like spirit behind that, so I'm sure you'll find something that's both like satisfying and meaningful.
Yes, that's what I'm looking for. Something
Yeah.
meaningful in life.
Mm-hmm. And is your husband in education in any way?
He is not. So he's
Okay.
the Greenville area also has many manufacturing companies, and
Mm-hmm.
he works for one of the the bigger manufacturing companies here. So he drives forklift. He's been there for over 20 years now. And so he's a hardworking person.
Yeah. I worked 2 summers on truck docks driving forklifts, and it's hard work. It's fun. If you're thinking of it as a little kid, you think, oh, I get to driving a forklift is fun, but it's also a lot of responsibility. I mean, those things are very can very quickly become very dangerous.
Yes. Yes.
Especially when you're physically exhausted and there's so much going on, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So definitely. And he's the same way. He's on the docks loading and unloading trucks. And so it's definitely a workout, and it's the way that his place works. It's 12-hour swing shifts. So he's got 12-hour shifts, and then it swings days and nights. So he's sleep schedules are crazy too sometimes, but
Yeah. Ooh.
yes.
Well, you guys are somehow making it work with your family and the extended family and godchildren.
Yes. Sometimes we wonder how it works, but it always seems to work. You know how it is. You just get up and do what needs done, especially when the kids were
Yeah.
little and they were all involved in sports and piano and stuff like that. And so getting them back and forth to practices and games, and, you just do what needs done.
Yeah. Wow. So do you guys manage to get much like free time, or like what are you both able to have like your weekends off, or at least one day off, or like what do you do for fun?
So the way his schedule works, he's off every other weekend. So we know we can plan things on his weekends off. I have 2 days out of the week that are my designated off days. And so we definitely plan things for those time frames. Now that the kids are grown, we're doing more traveling. We were able to go to Seattle, Washington, which has been on his bucket list for years. So we went there last fall and trying to decide what this year's vacation spot will be. But so it is fun to be able to hang out and do things together now that we're empty nesters. But we also, as far as for fun, we're really homebodies. We like to stay home. We're not out a lot, but we just enjoy each other's company. And so it's just fun to have chill evenings at home, even just running errands together, just being with each other is a lot of fun. So,
Yeah. Are you much of a cook? Like, does Cracker Barrel kind of align with like your, culinary interests or anything like that, or totally separate?
totally separate. My husband enjoys cooking. I cook because I have to, but we usually tag team in the kitchen. So he likes to season and marinate, and he puts the flavor in the food. And so he likes to handle all that stuff with the meats. And then I usually do the side items, the vegetables or whatever. And so we're definitely a tag team, cooking team. And we do enjoy that. He likes to cook with music. So he blares the music and goes to town. And by the end of it, we have dinner. So, but other than that, I am not a baker. I am not a big cook. I do it because I have to, not because I enjoy it.
I've found that, I think in cooking, like it can be very meditative. At least for me, I know that sometimes like I like to just do the whole thing because there is something about kind of forcing my mind to focus on the different aspects of the meal, and then like just having to chop things up might seem tedious to people from the outside, but like if you feel like your mind's all over the place, having that reason to just focus on chopping something can be satisfying. And also just like the smell, like chopping up garlic or handling garlic, and I mean I like those smells. And it sounds like your husband kind of might be cut from a similar cloth of like kind of getting into those flavors and smells and stuff.
Yes. And it's very enjoyable to see other people enjoy the outcome. He likes to,
Yeah.
when he cooks, he likes to share. He likes to fix plates for, send some home with family that's here.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Does he have a specialty?
I don't think so. He loves his crock pot. And so any
Uh-huh.
meats that we can do in the crock pot are definitely a favorite. But I don't think he has a specialty. He likes to do like a roast with the veggies is one of his favorites. But we like anything he cooks. I love when he makes
Mm-hmm.
salmon. If he makes salmon, I'll make
Mm-hmm.
grits.
I've been diving into grits. I have 8 different kinds of grits that I picked up from from when we were down in South Carolina. That I've been kind of like circulating through, just kind of tasting, what the different flavors are and stuff. And I think, I guess, I don't know if I'd say I'm proud. I'm not in a position to say that, but I think that for you, at least, you might appreciate that we're now at a point where we realize that instant grits are not that good.
Mm-mm.
Well, sometimes we have to do it because it's a time issue. But like my wife today was like, Christine noticed, she's like, "Yeah, I really like the other ones a lot better." I'm like, "Yeah, I know. I didn't have enough time to cook them for like 45 minutes, but yes, I totally agree."
Now, I know growing up in Minnesota, I had never heard of grits. Now, how is it like in New York? Or is there enough variety that you guys have been exposed to those types of things? Or was South Carolina your introduction to some of those Southern staples like grits?
I think my mind is open to trying new things, like if it comes up. So I remember having grits one time, like when I was in like San Antonio. I think it was in the South. I figured they must have grits, um, but I think it's interesting because I think we got started actually by my wife's parents. I think this is the route. I mean, Christy's Taiwanese, and like there's obviously a lot of rice that's in their food, and I think for breakfast we were having like egg over rice, and then I don't know, we just came across the idea of instant grits, at least, as something that was like quicker to prepare, and so we've been trying that. But I knew that there was more out there, so my first really like dive into grits was really being down there most recently and just trying all these ones, and then kind of mail ordering like from Ensign Mills and from others. So that was the epiphany, like, oh, these things really have good taste.
Yes, I have. Again, coming from up north and down here, I have fallen in love with grits, especially like
Yeah.
shrimp and grits or fish and grits. Love those for
Mm-hmm.
breakfast. I've
Mm-hmm.
fallen in love with pinto beans, turnip greens, cornbread. All of those are traditionally Southern foods that we didn't really have. I mean, I had heard of them, but we didn't really
Yeah.
have up north um, too much. And I have just fallen in love with them. I had mentioned
Yeah.
my dad liking to garden. And so one year, um, they had headed back up north for a time to visit. And so I was taking care of the garden while they were gone. And my dad had told me that the okra would be ready to pick. I could not for the life of me find the okra in his garden. I finally had to Google it. And those things grow on a tall stalk. I'm looking down on the ground, like green
Ah.
beans grow. I'm looking for okra down here, and they're way up here, like at
Mhm.
my eye level. Anyways, it was just kind of funny and humorous to me that we would not have grown okra up north. I've never seen okra on the plant before. So, but yes, some of those staple Southern items that I've just fallen in love with as a northerner.
Yeah, yeah, and I think, to go back to your question, yeah, the only grits you'd see in the store is like Quaker Oats instant grits, and there have been like some other kind of more like boutiquey, like I guess grains that have been coming out. So I think there was a little bit more, but there's not the focus that there is. Like you can find lots of different kinds of cold iced coffee or cold brews in the grocery stores here, but you're not going to find lots of different kinds of grits all lined up for your choice like you would down there. So.
Yes.
Um, so what's interesting, we're talking about this because I think I don't know if I've actually talked about it on the podcast, but I've mentioned to you. I think that like I'm starting this like travel company, and we're gonna try to get we're gonna get kids from New York, high schoolers, to go down to South Carolina and learn about South Carolina. And one of the ways I wanted to explore South Carolina was through food, and to kind of have like the trip explore the hypothesis that like shrimp and grits is the quintessential dish of South Carolina. So I'll ask you: would you say that shrimp and grits is the quintessential dish for South Carolina?
I don't know that I've been, and I know I've lived here for over 20 years, but I don't know if I would be the best qualified to make that assumption. I think that as you get closer to the coastal areas, you're going to find a lot more like your shrimp boils and your shrimp and grits and things like that. Um, I love shrimp and grits, but one thing that kind of, I won't say frustrates me, but a lot of times when you go to restaurants and they have shrimp and grits on the menu, most of the time it's going to be like Cajun or, it's going to be a spicy, and I'm not a spicy
Mm.
person. And
Mm.
so it's hard for me to find shrimp and grits in a restaurant that I can enjoy. And so we like to cook it at home, but definitely shrimp and grits is definitely thought of as a South Carolina um, item.
Mhm.
You wouldn't go to Minnesota and order shrimp and grits. I mean, you're just not going to get
Yeah,
it.
right. And I guess sometimes people like talk about like barbecue, and I think like when we were down there, I don't think we didn't do a good survey of the barbecue in South Carolina by any means, but that usually kind of comes up as well,
Mhm.
as far as like the kind of food you have to have. But what I've loved as I've learned more about like the food scene is like just kind of seeing like a lot of the comfort foods that you kind of grow up with. Like I don't would say their roots aren't necessarily in South Carolina, but like they're the food is made at a higher level and cared about more there than you might see here. Like fried chicken,
Yes.
you're going to find better versions in South Carolina than you're going to find in New York.
Yes, I agree.
So,
Those
so have you ever been to New York, or would that be on your travel itinerary at some point?
I have never been to New York. One of my bucket list items is I want to see Niagara Falls. So my husband has gone up to New York. He rode with a friend one time, and so it was a quick trip in, trip out. But he has seen like the Statue of Liberty and stuff like that, even just from the car window. He's seen it, but not to explore. So yes, definitely at some point we plan to head up to New York and go see Niagara Falls and kind of explore
Yeah.
some more that way.
We had never been to we went to Niagara Falls for the first time in 2020, and it was I was blown away by it. I mean, I think you hear about it as like kind of like a touristy site, and sometimes like when you go to a place like that, you kind of like I was prepared to be disappointed, but the immensity and the power and the beauty of it was really something to behold.
Yes, I have heard the same. My mom is from Pennsylvania, and so that's where my parents met and married, was in Pennsylvania. And they actually went to Niagara Falls for their honeymoon. And so I've got that kind of little family connection to it also. But yes,
Yeah,
it's definitely one of the places that I want to see is Niagara Falls.
yeah. It's sadly it's quite a far away from New York City though, so you'll
It'll be like a
um
whole day
but
just to travel from one end to the other. Yes.
it's like it's about six maybe 8 hours between here and there. But I think in terms of I guess the broader idea for this podcast of just trying to like open your bubble and raise your awareness and expand your awareness, it was when we did that, it was really eye-opening and wonderful to kind of like realize how big New York is and how vast it is and how different things are even in your own state. And I'm sure that must apply to South Carolina as well, but to have that experience of going from New York City to that part of Western New York was pretty exhilarating.
Yes. Um, in South Carolina, you've got we're in the northern part of South Carolina. You've got your coastal regions, and then you've got, the marshy areas down towards the bottom of the state. But I feel more like for Minnesota whenever you talk about that. I grew up in small town. But then my dad's family was from like the other side of the state where it's just farmlands, and there's small towns, but there is distance between the small towns. Like you can't, they're from the area where if you need groceries, you're going to travel for groceries. You do all your shopping for the month in one day. Um, and then my sister, when she had grown up, she moved to the capital city in Minneapolis. So she was, or in Minnesota. So she was from the St. Paul, Minneapolis area for many years. That's where she raised her kids. And so visiting her, it was, drastically different from the rest of the state. And the first time that I took my husband up to Minnesota, we flew into Minneapolis, St. Paul. We took a rental car, drove up to my little hometown, drove across the state to where my dad's family was, and then drove back across. We did this big triangle. And just to see the differences in the state, the layout, the land, even the feel of, laid back to busy, warm and welcoming to, we've got other stuff to do. It was really an eye opener. So
Yeah. I know that that I was living in New York City. I can relate to the second part of what you described, which is like too busy. But like I think like one of the things that is interesting is once you realize that I think like people are oftentimes like products of their setting. Um, it kind of makes it a little bit easier to understand people because, in New York, if you said hello to every person you passed, like if I walked from here to the subway, I'll pass 120 people or more. You couldn't actually say hi to everybody. So you end up kind of like, you're aware and you'll like it's great to see people. And I think one of the things I found is like in our neighborhood was once we had kids going to school in our neighborhood, you became more part of the community because in the city is like 7 million people and there's just so many people kind of coming and going that it's easy to get kind of, you move in an area, but you don't necessarily like live in that area. Like you have a house there, but you might live in your office, frankly, or you have college friends that live in different parts of the city. So you just don't have the opportunity or the reason to necessarily put down roots in your community until you have kids. I mean, I guess if you're, a member of a church or if there are other things that would kind of draw you into a community that exists, but the city there's more transients and there's just more people in their own little bubbles. And it's because there's so much out there, you can stay in your own little bubble. And, if you like Tibetan food, there might be 1,000, 10,000 people who like Tibetan food. So you never have to get out of your Tibetan food bubble, I guess, to use an example.
yes.
So it's, I guess when I was down, it's nice to kind of feel like it's a little slower and it's nice to have like talk with people or feel like people have time. And it's just different in New York. I think people are open to talking, but they're just kind of like, you have to kind of pop the bubble a little bit. And then like people like, oh, like, yeah, conversation with people. Sure. Like even New Yorkers like going to other places where things feel slower and you can have conversation. It's just in your everyday life. You feel the pressure to get from one point to another. And yeah, you just can't say hi to everybody. And, frankly, people would sit on the subway and start conversation with somebody, and if it's not for a good reason, people kind of a little bit like, why are you talking to me?
Yes, that was definitely one of the, to go up to, especially like where my dad's side of the family grew up, where his home was, because since there's not much around, you rely on your neighbors in your community so much. So they know everyone and know everything. And in fact, the day that we were getting ready to drive back across to the Capitol, my brother was seeing us off and he was like, just stop at the gas station, 2 miles up the road there, tell them to put it on my tab. And I'm looking at him like, I cannot go into a gas station and be like, hey, I'm going to pump gas but not pay you. Just somebody else is going to pay you whenever they come. But that's the way they do it there. And
yeah.
So, yes, to be somewhere where people just honestly want to know, hey, who are you and what's your story? And, welcome to our little town. And it's just a different feeling. It really is.
Yeah.
And it is kind of standoffish at first because you go into the little diner and you're just expecting to go in and eat and leave like you do any other restaurant around. But no, they're, where are you from? What brings you here? You've got to go see this. You've got to go do that. So it's a different feeling.
Yeah. So is there, I guess, well, I'm trying to dispel the idea that, like, I don't know if don't know if I'd say New Yorkers are rude. I think they're just in their bubbles, like zipping around. But is there any, like, I guess, perceptions that you feel like you'd want to dispel about, like, I don't know, like South Carolina, or like things, like, as, like, I don't, people, it's more complicated, or.
I don't think so. You're definitely, I mean, you've got everybody talks about Southern hospitality. So you've definitely got your born and bred Southern, everybody come to my house for this event. But then you've got a lot of people that have moved to the area, come to the area. And so I think we've got such a mix of people down in this area now that I still definitely feel that there's that Southern friendly vibe most places that you go. But it's a good mix now where you're going to get some Southern hospitality and some just, hey, I'm here for business and that's it. Let me get my business done and go type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So
the one thing that comes up in conversations a lot, that when it is in talking with people, in South Carolina, about, like, this trip that I'm trying to plan, is that there are people, even like yourself, which you just did, which is, like, they've lived in South Carolina, but, like, when I ask them, like, an opinion about South Carolina, like living or like food, they're just like, well, I mean, I've lived here 20 years, but you really should talk to a native South Carolinian, which is interesting because, like, in New York, I think you could live here for a month and already be like a native New Yorker. I can't think of anybody in New York that I wouldn't do, like, if you asked their opinion, where they wouldn't have it. Maybe that's the New Yorker thing, like, just everybody has an opinion. But I think what I've found is that living in New York City, it's more of like a mindset that you can quickly adopt or not. Because there are people that have lived in the city for a while who are just like, you can tell, like, they're not, like, the vibe isn't right for them, but they're here or they're stuck here. But so you could be here 20 years and not really be a New Yorker, but you can also be here 5 minutes and, like, you're already kind of like electrically plugged in, and you get it or you don't. So it's interesting to hear that. Now, why is that? Are there, like, kind of, is there traditions and other things which you just don't feel like you can speak about, because you weren't born into it, or you have any thoughts on that?
I do kind of feel that way, and I can understand the difference. I think New York is like, there's so many people that, I mean, who's to say who's truly a New Yorker that's been here for years and who's, as opposed to someone who's been here for 5 years or whatever. Where down here, you've got your folks who have been born and raised in this culture. And, for me, was not raised in the culture and moved down here, it would be almost like stepping on toes to speak for them, to speak for the Southern culture when I wasn't raised in it, type of thing. But so I do feel like it's kind of that I am not in a position to have an opinion. But yes, I do. I can see the difference, though, between, like, a New Yorker that's lived there for a month and already has opinions, as opposed to someone who's been in the South for 20 years and still, I'll let them answer that.
Maybe it seems like it's maybe because there's more people that grow up and stay there, whereas, like, in New York, maybe there are, but there's just so many others swirling around that you just you don't feel the need to defer to the experts, because there really is no experts, whereas for you there's more.
Yes.
That's interesting.
Yes.
That's very now, for you, just, I mean, given, like, you, because I guess with I guess you're religious, obviously, it sounds like, and you've always gone to church. I have not. I stopped when, like, when my parents like split up, that was any church going habits we had stopped. But was there a difference in going to church up where you were, in northern Minnesota, versus being in South Carolina, or is there something that, or is it like the same?
So I definitely noticed a difference. Like I had said, growing up, with, um, I was always involved with my church, always involved with the children's ministries in the church and stuff like that. And coming down here, at first, I was trying to get involved with like the bigger churches. And where up north, they wanted people to help. You know, if you could help, we love you. Come help. But down here, the bigger churches, they already had their set people. And so it was like, we don't need help in nursery, or we don't need. And that was hard for me because I wasn't used to not being involved. And so then when I started, working with the small church in the lower income neighborhood, I got again that feel of, oh, you will help, we love you, come help. And the kids, I just connected with the kids in such a way that, um, I couldn't imagine not being involved with the kids, not having them in my life. And so that was definitely a different feel. Like here on along the Bible Belt, you have those bigger churches where they've got their people that, hey, we've got it on lockdown. We're doing what needs done. Thanks for the offer, but, and I wasn't used to that. So
Interesting. So it sounds like the difference maybe was more like smaller town versus big. I mean, was it because you were in a smaller town, or is it that more the way the churches are organized?
probably the size, probably the smaller town, down here, the larger churches. But as far as the organization of the church, I think they were similar, service styles were similar to of course, down here too, there's so many churches, you can find any style that fits what you're looking for, what speaks to you. But, a lot of the churches are the same style that I grew up with, that conservative in music, conservative in dress, conservative, that type of thing. So the style of church was very much the same, but the opportunity for involvement was different, I found.
Okay. Well, it's great that you did end up finding what you were looking for, and
Yes.
that you kind of like persevered in seeking that out.
Yes.
Um, so when you guys go out to Seattle, what are you going to be doing?
So we went last fall.
Oh, yeah. Okay, great.
Yep. So it's been, like I said, it had been something on my husband's bucket list for years.
Mm-hmm.
He was a big Seattle Supersonics fan. And of course, that basketball team no longer exists. But I do believe my children have watched more YouTube highlight reels of Seattle Supersonic and Sean Kemp basketball than they probably had, any regular games through their childhood. It was just a part of growing up to watch Supersonics and Sean Kemp. So it was always a big deal to him. So we got to go see the Space Needle and go up to the top of it. And he very much enjoyed that. And then we happened to be there when my husband is a big Lego fan, and we happened to be there when they were doing a Lego convention in the area. So we were able to participate in that. It was their first one after COVID. And so it was a little bit smaller scale, but still just good to get back in groups again and be able to see things. And so we did that, spent 3 days, I believe, and just enjoyed the time together.
That's great. Well, if when you come up to New York City, you can see Kevin Durant, who's a former Seattle Supersonic.
Very true.
Yeah. And I respect the man who's still in touch with the Lego side of his personality.
And he very much is. Although he remembers a set or two that he had as a child, but the Lego bug bit him in adulthood, and he's very much smitten with Legos now. So it is his passion. We had met our new
So on it,
neighbor a while back, and our granddaughter was with us, and she asked my husband, "What do you do for work?" You know, that classic. Kids, you ask them what grade they're in school. Adults, you ask, "What do you do for work?" So she asked, "What do you
Mhm.
do for work?" And Josephina said, "My papa builds Legos." He does not build Legos for work, but that's what she knows here. They love to build Legos together.
That's great. Well, I mean, I guess there are jobs now. Like you can be like a Lego master or something. Those positions do exist.
Yes, those positions do exist, although my husband's philosophy is when something becomes a job, it's no longer enjoyable because you have to
Yes.
do it. So
Yes.
he very much just enjoys building in his spare time and
Yeah.
seeing his creations come together.
We've reached a point with our boys where like the Legos that they bought, they're not interested in anymore. So we're kind of in this like pain position where we're like, do we sell them? Do we give them away? Do we sell them and give the money to charity? But they're just unfortunately like collecting dust right now, and it's kind of painful. I get it, but I wish that because they still did have the draw they used to, because it's wild to see the kids kind of like put these things together and make these worlds in their with their hands and in their
Mm-hmm.
minds. Um, but it's a little unfortunate that
Yeah, it's
we're at this
definitely
position.
stages, and you know, you may find that you give them away, and then years down the road, the boys are like, "Oh, I wish I still had," But
Yeah.
when it comes to space and storage and stuff like that, you've got to make decisions. But talking about the creativity, my husband is very much a follow the instructions, create it. He's done a few creations that he's just built from his own thoughts and creations, but for the most part, he likes to follow instructions. But
Mm.
it's fun to watch our granddaughter and her imagination and the way she'll put things together. And, the pizza delivery girl delivers pizzas in her tutu. She's got her tutu on and her fairy wings, and she's delivering pizza on her little go kart. And, just those fun, imaginative um, things that she comes up with. And so I very much enjoy watching her play with Legos because the imagination just rolls.
Yeah. So in the Burton household, I'm picturing like a weekend night. Maybe he's with a Lego set, and what are you doing? Are you looking
I'm
for pieces for him, or are you got your own thing?
so I like to, I'm usually nearby doing something. I'm not a TV person, but I like to read. I like to play games on my phone. So I'm usually doing one of those two things, sitting on the couch doing one of those two things. I will do some arts and crafts from time to time. Um, Kind of when the bug bites me, I'll do this for a while and then back off of it. And so, but yes, I do also help him sometimes. He'll be like, I can't find this piece, or this step is frustrating me, or I missed a step and I can't figure out where. And so I'll offer support as I can. And so yes, but most evenings are he's at his Lego table building, and I'm in the area or on the couch doing something, reading or playing on my phone or
Mhm.
taking a nap.
Have you always read books? I found like for myself, I think it was really only in the last few years where I started reading, and I think it was kind of disconnecting myself, frankly, from Facebook, at least from like regularly being on it. That kind of like allowed me to have more time to read. So have you always been a reader though?
So as a child, I was always a reader. I always had a book all summer long. I'd be out on the porch or, staying up late reading. And I guess in high school, I found that I could get so immersed in books that I kind of disconnected from the reality around me. Um, and by that, I mean like my chores weren't getting done, or I was pushing to the last minute getting ready for something, or those types of things, because I was just always reading. And so I kind of did a cold turkey, like, I've just got to stop reading because I've got to focus on other stuff. And I did. And through college, then you're into textbooks and all that. And I didn't really pick up much of any books for entertainment. And through the years, I've had kind of times where I've read. I especially enjoy like the young adult novels, the ones that are meant for the teenage, um, just the ones that explore how teenagers deal with life and handling things and their emotions. I find I learn a lot from them. And so I have throughout the years, read some. Sometimes I'll go through a span where I might read 5 books in a row and then I might not read any for a while. So it is very sporadic. I do get my times where I'm like, okay, I need to distance myself from my handheld electronic, whether it be Facebook or games or whatever it might be. And so I need to read a book. And so I might finish one. And I like to have a book when I'm traveling and things like that. So I haven't gotten as much back into reading as I would like to, because I have plenty of books on my shelf that I have not read, but I feel like I'll get there, especially now that we've got more evenings free and stuff like that. I'll get back into reading more. But yes, so that's where I usually am.
Yeah. One of the, I think, unexpected delights of living in, at least in our neighborhood in Brooklyn, is that there are a lot of people who like they'll leave books out on their stoop. So like it's not uncommon for me to just kind of be walking around like, oh, I've never read this book before, and like just kind of put it in my bag and like take it home, because people like they're done with their book and they're share it. So it's like this, like the Brooklyn Library is just like the brownstone stoops.
That is really cool. I love that idea.
Yeah.
We have various places
So,
around here that like maybe Girl Scouts or Boy Scouts or something like that will create a free library, and it's just a little box that's put on the, kind of like a mailbox on the edge of the property. And it just has books, and you can leave books or take books, or it's just a little free library. And every once in a while, you'll be driving through a neighborhood and see one, and it just makes me smile because it's just kind of a cool little idea. But
yeah. There was somebody they were describing like a book is like it's almost like a life sim. It gives you, it's like a simulator. So like when you think about like all the different kinds of media that you get distracted by, and like it's funny hearing you talking about like books being so all consuming that it was distracting you from your chores. It reminds me of my kids with TikTok.
yes,
But to me, I guess, and I think everything has has some kind of benefit. Like I don't want to be one of those like old people who's just like complaining about the current technology, right? Because when we were growing up, people would complain about I don't know, VCRs or MTV or whatever, and before that it was Elvis Presley, or like there's always something that's like taboo and driving the older generation crazy.
yes,
But I think there's a place for everything, maybe, and it's just more a matter of like moderation. And I think that kind of is which is like there's something for everything. But I think the merit for books is that it allows you to kind of really immerse yourself. Like when I read To Kill a Mockingbird, it's like I felt like I was at that house. I felt like I was those people. And even the way that she wrote the book back then is like a different way of like thinking. It's like slower. It's like the way you were saying, like South Carolina is slower. That like the descriptions in To Kill a Mockingbird, it's like you're in the slower paced South in the 40s or 20s or whenever it was. It was fully immersive, which I think is
yes.
not something that can be replicated even with like virtual reality, like an Oculus. Like that just kind of puts you in there, but it's like superficial. That was really put me in the mindset. So that's why I think I appreciate the beauty of books.
Yes. Yes. I'm the
So.
same way. I love to very much like your podcast is set up to step into somebody else's world for just a little bit and see how they live. And that's to me what books give you the opportunity to do. You know,
Yeah.
I love to read a book about someone that's completely different from me and get their life perspective. So yes.
Yeah, and I think when you do that, I think you inevitably learn something more than like not. Like I think there's sometimes a fear or there's a comfort zone. Like I understand the idea of just kind of wanting to stay in your comfort zone, but I've always found like when you travel, to me, one of the great things with traveling is that it gives you that state of mind to relax and enjoy things and notice details maybe of life that you don't get to notice, and then you can kind of
Yes.
bring that back because now your mind is more awake. So when you're reading something different, it can still make you love where you are even more. Like, like just being in New York City, if you're reading a book about New York City, you put the book down and now you're back in South Carolina, and like you might be electrified by both experiences then.
Yes.
So
Yes.
yeah. So um well, I guess we've hit the hour mark, and I'm sure you've got children to take care of and other things to move on from. But I guess before we finish up, can I ask you what gives you hope at the end of the day?
Hope at the end of the day. Of course, I love to know that I'm coming home to my family, etc. Um, but one thing that I tried to instill in my children as they were growing up, and we live in a world that we're tempted to think is hopeless. There's not much hope out there. Is that there is good and bad everywhere you look, and so find the good. Whether it's religion, region, ethnicity, occupation, find the good people and really look towards them, because that is our hope for the future. The people that can take good and continue to spread it throughout the world.
Perfect. Yes, that's wonderful. Thank you. Okay. Well, best of everything to you, and maybe we'll see you when down in South Carolina this summer.
Yes, that would be very fun. That would be very fun.
All right. Okay. Well, thanks so much, Darla. I really appreciate having you on the podcast.
Thank you
Wish you
for
and your family the
having me.
best.
I enjoyed talking to you today.
All right. Thank you. Hey, bye.